they've been okay, but they haven't been great. Jason Smith is essentially playing the starters minutes. When Vucevic first went out, they tried inserting him into the starting lineup, and it didn't really work. So he's now coming off the bench. Dwayne Dedmon is an interesting player. He's got a lot of talent and potential, a lot of athleticism, but he can be really, really inconsistent. As many holes and flaws as Nikola Vucevic has, if he's healthy and he can go, it's beneficial to them for winning that he's out there. And again, these last 9 games to me are really about establishing a culture and an expectation. If you're hurt and you can't play, absolutely don't play. I mean, I'm not saying throw Vucevic out there with a strained groin and he can barely move. What I'm saying is if he's capable of playing and he can contribute to the team, then I think you have to have him out there. You have to still kind of treat these games as if you're trying to make the playoffs, as if you're trying to achieve something. And sitting guys when they're healthy, to me, that sets the wrong tone. That sends the wrong message saying, it's okay, these games don't matter. That's not the message that the Magic have tried to send all year. And so I think changing that message at this point is not beneficial to the team as a whole.
Well, they had a nice win over Chicago on Saturday night. It was a stretch of 3 games in 4 days. They had played a lot of road games. Actually, their 5th game in 7 nights, it looks like here. They were at Toronto, at Boston, at Detroit, at Miami, and then they come home and blow out a Chicago team that has a lot to play for right now. And again, this is one of those situations where in the NBA, you get a win that people aren't going to look at with the amount of respect that it deserves. But for this team to rally, to snap that 6-game streak, and it was a pretty bad situational spot for them, I think it says a lot about, what the potential upside of this team could be for next season.
Yeah, and to do that without Vucevic, without Victor Oladipo, your 2 leading scorers, I think also says something. I mean, except for maybe the game Wednesday against Detroit, dating back to when they came home from the West Coast trip, they beat Denver. They lost a close game to Cleveland. They went on the road, lost a close game to Toronto, lost a relatively close game to Boston, got blown out in Detroit, played okay for a half against Miami without Oladipo in there, and then beat Chicago. I mean, they've had some good games and some good efforts mixed in, and with the injuries, I think that their talent levels kind of suffered a little bit. They've had some difficulty. They just had some difficulty stringing together, a full game. And so what was really impressive about Saturday, with the 5th game in 7 nights, without Oladipo, without Ersan Ilyasova, without Nikola Vucevic, they put together a complete game. And they weathered the storm and they grew a lot in that moment. And it was good to see. And then hopefully they can carry that momentum forward and pick up a few more wins. They got Brooklyn on Tuesday, so that should be a winnable game. Although Brooklyn's been playing much better, it's definitely an opportunity for them to continue building on the things that they're doing well right now.
Well, one of the things I like to do when I have you on the air here is talk about some of the recent opponents that Orlando's played, so that way we can get a little bit more of a broad perspective. And I want to begin with the Detroit Pistons, who caught Orlando in a very bad spot. Orlando playing against teams like Charlotte, Cleveland, Toronto, Boston. Then they go to Detroit, the Palace at Auburn Hills, kind of up there in the middle of nowhere a little bit. Not really a place that teams get too excited to go to. And I'm not really necessarily making excuses for either side here in this game. It's just the realities of the NBA schedule. So for the Pistons here, who are fighting for that 8th seed, they currently have it by a couple games over the Bulls. What did you see from Detroit in that game that would give people reason to be on or against them here down the stretch?
I mean, they're playing just really, really well together. I mean, right now they're making a lot of their shots and 3-pointers, and that makes them extremely dangerous because they've got some weapons. They've got guys that can attack the basket. What they maybe lack still is consistent 3-point shooting. Magic fans are pretty familiar with Tobias Harris, and he's getting really good open looks because of the driving ability of Reggie Jackson and because of Andre Drummond's presence in the lane, and he's turned into a pretty decent 3-point shooter with the spacing that he's been getting. Their issue, I think, is still going to be, can they consistently make threes? Jackson has been hitting threes pretty well, but he's not a consistent 3-point shooter. They went back and played Atlanta on Saturday and looked got down and got beat pretty handily. I mean, they can still get pulled apart. They're still a young team kind of learning how to play with this pressure, but they're a solid team. Stan Van Gundy's done a really good job, kind of implementing a culture and implementing a style of play for them, and they've really taken to it. And obviously there's a lot of confidence in them, and they seem to have that 8th spot pretty much wrapped up. Obviously it's not done yet, but they seem to be in pretty good position. And while I don't think they're a team that can necessarily challenge Cleveland or even Toronto in a playoff series, I think that they're a good team, and this is a good step forward for that organization and franchise.
Well, and the thing about it was, kind of wondering how some of their new acquisitions would mesh with the team. And the expectation was that a guy like Stan Van Gundy, would have a pretty good ability to get everybody on the same page. And that certainly seems like the case here. And, as they go a little bit deeper into the season, we'll have to see how things go in the playoffs. But, I mean, Stan Van Gundy is a guy that you're pretty familiar with, to be sure.
Yeah. I mean, and he's one of the, at least 6, 7, 8 best coaches in the league. And what he's done in Detroit this year is really a testament to that. Andre Drummond's really blossomed. Obviously, teams still kind of foul him, and they know that that's a weakness. But, Reggie Jackson was a huge risk of a trade, and it's really worked out for them. So he obviously has a good eye for talent, put together a good deal to bring him in last year. And, they've got a lot of tools that they can continue to grow and develop as they get more playoff experience and more confidence that they could be an up-and-coming team and dangerous team in the Eastern Conference moving forward after they get some experience this year.
So the Miami Heat, who you see regularly, and then you'll see them again April 8th and April 10th with a home-and-home between Miami and Orlando. For the Heat, a lot of people were looking at this team, with the Chris Bosh news right around the All-Star break and sort of, kind of throwing a wet blanket on their chances. And you look at them here, yeah, they're the 5 seed. Yeah, they'd have to go on the road and play Boston. But they're only one game out of being in the 3 seed, which, would send them into a matchup against a very, very hot Charlotte team. Charlotte's one of the best teams in the NBA over the last 6 weeks or so. But things really jumbled up there. So anybody 3 through 6 could finish in any way. What did you see from Miami in that game that, is something that our listeners can take with them from, what you've seen recently?
I mean, what Miami does really well, I mean, their defense is really strong. Whether Hassan Whiteside's in there or not, and Whiteside's obviously a big deterrent at the rim, for opposing offenses. But what I thought they did really well is they're able to kind of mix up paces and play at different types of speeds. I mean, I think their preferred speed is a little bit slower considering some of their personnel, but when Goran Dragic is playing really well, they're a really difficult team to stop because of Whiteside, because of Wade cutting through the rim. They just have a lot of guys that provide really, really good energy, and they really know who they are, and that's as important as anything else. I don't know if they'll eventually be able to climb up and secure that 3 seed, but they're in the running, and a lot of it is because whoever needs to step up, they step up, and that's a really good sign for a team like them that is kind of veteran team. Their guys don't know that they don't always have to be the guy. They just have to have a guy step up, and usually they're pretty good at finding the guy that's supposed to do it in those situations.
I'll be really interested to see how things go for them because, as you mentioned, this is a very poised team. They've got a lot of composure on this roster, and you've got teams like Boston and Charlotte with a lot of guys that really haven't been through this, playoff stretch run or a playoff series before. Boston got a little bit of experience last year getting swept by the Cavs, but, a lot of the guys on those 2 teams kind of pales in comparison to what you see from Miami. And then, of course, there's Atlanta, another Southeast Division team that's been through this a few times now. So they're decent shape here in the East. But the team that Orlando beat on Saturday night, the Chicago Bulls, obviously for the Bulls, injuries have been a big deal. They've been awful away from the United Center. They're 12-23 on the road, 24-13 at home. Is there any hope for this Chicago team based on what you saw?
There's hope because they've got talent, and we know that they can play to a higher level. Obviously, they've got a long way to go. They've got to really focus in. I think Taj Gibson called this week a do or die week for them. They've got to just play with energy. I mean, the way they played on Saturday, the joke was kind of, see, there's there's a team doing worse than the Magic that's in worse shape than the Magic at this point. They just didn't seem to play with much energy or cohesion. They could consistently break down a Magic defense that's really, really struggled. And, even when they made their run to cut it to 9, Orlando did their job and buckled down and took it to them. And that's something they haven't done all year. So I don't want to say Chicago quit on anybody or each other, but, the way that they lost that game was pretty inexcusable for a team in the playoff race, particularly with some of the things Gibson said, particularly with some of the things that all the players have been saying for the last month or so. I mean, they were saying a lot of the same things when they came through Orlando the first time, that, they something wasn't clicking. And so clearly something hasn't been clicking with them. They haven't completely bought in, and that's why they're in the situation they're in. It's not a good situation for Chicago. Something's got to be done. They're not playing up to their expectation level, or the offense doesn't fit what they're trying to do, or the defense doesn't fit, or whatever it is. They just don't have it, and that's got to change if they want to make the playoffs, or if they want to get back there next year.
Well, we had a team meeting for Chicago after Saturday's game, and team meetings are, I guess, they're a necessary evil. I mean, a lot of times you get a lot of narratives, a lot of buzz coming out of these team meetings, and expectations that teams are going to suddenly turn it around and suddenly figure things out. And for the Bulls here, it's not really a big surprise, because, I mean, you had a guy like Jimmy Butler, you had some other guys on the team kind of talking about Fred Hoiberg and throwing shade his way, that they need more leadership, that maybe he's not the right guy. And of course, now that discussion's already coming up. Is Fred Hoiberg going to be able to keep this job? Is he better suited as a college coach? All those types of things that we normally see, when you have a situation where a veteran-laden team is struggling late in the year, failing to meet expectations, that kind of, it winds up going to the coach. And, did you see anything that there's, a lack of communication, that there's maybe a lack of trust between Hoiberg and his players, or vice versa?
I don't want to speak too much to that, just because I haven't followed them that closely. Certainly, I think it's very possible that there's still some hard feelings about losing Thibodeau. He worked his guys hard, but they bought in. I mean, it's as simple as that. You can call it a trust issue. And I think the Magic have had these issues, had some of these issues too with Scott Skiles, and it's not necessarily that they're not trying or they're not trusting the coach, but they're just not buying in. They're not giving that little bit of extra effort that the good teams have to do, and some of that is establishing credibility, and some of that is how guys are feeling or how guys are being rewarded for strong play. But the Bulls had a lot of problems on that roster too. Their bench, they went extremely young with their bench, and they haven't performed up to the level that most expected. They had injuries to Joakim Noah. Joakim Noah, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, is really the heart of that team. He was the guy that pushed everyone to another level and was always there doing those extra things and brought everyone's level of play up. I don't know if Derrick Rose can be that guy anymore with his physical limitations now. Jimmy Butler is still kind of a young guy in the league. I think he wants to be a leader, but isn't quite there yet. But at the same time, though, Taj Gibson was trying to do all those things on Saturday, and no one was coming with them. So it just feels like it's a team that's a little bit lost, kind of resigned to how the season's going to go, and that's why they needed that team meeting, and we'll see how they come out in their next game to determine if it worked or not.
So we'll cycle back to the Magic here, who've got 3 games coming up this week in 4 nights, 4 games in 6 nights if you include Sunday's game. It's safe to say that Tuesday's game, even though there's nothing on the line, it's a must-win game for Orlando, because you can't lose to a team like Brooklyn at home if you want to take that next step organizationally.
Yeah, and the Magic have done a really good job against Brooklyn all year. And, they won their first 2 games at the Barclays Center this year. It's been a team that they've been able to play poorly against and beat. Obviously, this Brooklyn team is not the same as the Brooklyn teams that they faced in December and January. This Brooklyn team's playing a little bit better. They've got a little bit more energy. They're not playing out the string either. And so, it's not just that it's a game that the Magic should win or must win, but it's a game that the Magic have to be prepared